We're at session 18, looking through 1st and 2nd Samuel. We're getting near the end. We'll have one more study time together, but that's not going to be for another 3 weeks. Next week, we will have Ash Wednesday, and then the week after that is spring break. And then we'll be able to get back together and finish up the last 3 chapters of 2nd Samuel. But we're in chapter 19, and again, I won't be able to read every section. I'll assume that you've done that work. But we're going to pick up at 19 where David has just won the victory. Absalom has died, and you've got this David who has been exiled, been kicked out of his city, out of his power, has won that victory now, and he's grieving. And we would all be grieving. All of us would struggle. We closed last time at how do you grieve well? What are the steps for that? What do you want to make sure you do? But also, this is a critical moment, and so it's right that verses 1 through 8, you've kind of got some rebuking of David from Joab when he hears that David's grieving like this, and it's not just him, but all the people are modeling what David set for them. They're in shame. They're in grief. They're covering themselves. Joab's very frustrated because these people have risked for David and for his kingdom. And his response here, David's response, really could cost him his kingdom. And so Joab has a word to get up and get going. And there's some life lessons here. It is a reminder. I heard somebody say one time, your leadership will go as far as you can take pain. I don't know if I fully agree with it, but I get the point. That being a leader, sometimes you have to take it on the chin and you have to press through. Do we need to rest? Absolutely. And you see places where David is weary. We'll see it again today where he's weary. And you've got to be able to press through. Absolutely. But you need some Sabbath rest. You need to grieve. And David does that with the loss of his first child. And he was rightly doing that here, but not. But this was a moment because they're at crisis. The kingdom is at stake. You have an opportunity to unify the people. Sometimes you just got to press through, and some of us need to hear that. There needs to be rest on the end. It can't be a constant, but we've got to press through. And partly, if you go to verse 3, it's because what he's modeling for the people. People follow leadership. And so whatever you model, that's what you can expect and should expect people to follow. So again, leaders ought to model rest. I think pastors sometimes set bad models when they put their family on the back burner, when they put rest on the back burner. That's a bad model to set. People may say, great, look at all he's doing for us. Look at all she's doing for us. No. You need to be able to model the priority of family and model the priority of rest. But here, they're mimicking what they see. He's covered himself, and they're going to do the same. And at this point, it's a critical time. And so as a leader, you've got to get these people ready for what's next. You got to get them unified. So people are going to not believe what you say. They're going to believe what you do. They're not going to mimic what you say. They're going to mimic what you do. So you think sometimes, hey, I'm a teacher. Look what I've taught them. But your life says something else. They're going to follow that something else. They're going to follow your life, not your teaching, whether it's parenting or leadership, Sunday school teaching, whatever that may be. Verse 8 as well talks about the importance of correction, and David usually does well when he's under right correction, godly counsel. And this is tough to do if you're Joab. He explains, anyway, so this is another reminder for correction. And then lastly, if you read verse 6, Joab's part of his critique of David is, David, it's like you're telling these people who have risked for you that your son, who's an adult who made a decision, a bad decision, that he's more precious than they are. And we can be there sometimes. And listen, it's right to weep. It's right to have a season of grief. But if you stay there too long, what you communicate to the living is they're not as precious as the dead. The dead are with the Lord. They're in the presence of God. And yes, we ought to be broken. Yes, we ought to struggle. But no, we should not communicate to people that they are less than, those whom are left behind, who are to care for us, that we're to still lead. Life for us is not over. And so we've always got to be careful. There's going to be ebb and flow of life where we, in our stewardship, the stewardship mandate that's given to us in chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis and throughout Scripture, there are going to be times when a child needs to take priority over a marriage. But that can't be routine. The marriage, that relationship takes priority over every relationship in a family. There may be times where giving help to a caring parent can take priority for a season, but if it's all the time, you've missed the biblical mandate. Same thing with work. There's going to be time. We should not be frustrated when work from time to time takes priority over the marriage, but it can't be typical. It can't be always. You can't hide behind, well, I've got to provide. You're outside the will of God if your work is always the priority. All right? Okay, so in verses 9 through 15, David returns to Jerusalem. And listen, there's arguing between Israel and Judah. As Nathan has prophesied in chapter 12, there's always going to be a sword. There's always going to be struggle because of what David has done. David sends them word, hey, come and now meet me, Judah. Bring me over the Jordan. And when you get to this section in 16 to 43, it's just a reminder again, not just of what David models, but what is the heart of God. This God who wants to give us a ministry of reconciliation, this God who has a heart of forgiveness. Now, David doesn't forget some of these things, and really that's what forgiveness means. The New Testament word means you throw it away, you hurl it away, right? God is so good, he separates our sins as far as the east is from the west. We're going to get here. David doesn't totally forget when we get to 1 Kings 2. But Shimei comes, Zebah comes, and you think in your mind, because I grew up as a young kid watching Mid-South Wrestling, oh, this is going to be a steel cage match. The one who's cursed him and thrown rocks at him, the one who's manipulated him, told a little story of Mephibosheth, the very son of Jonathan, his best friend. Oh, David is going to have his way with these guys. And then it all starts. So they come, and it starts with Amasa, verse 13. David says, you're going to be the commander, not Joab. He doesn't say why. Maybe it's because David knows what Joab's done with Abner or with his disobedience in other ways earlier. But maybe it's a sign of reconciliation. I'm not going to do anything to you. You're going to lead. This is going to unify us. And Shimei, when he comes, he falls down, verse 18, always right reference, a recurring theme throughout these books. This one who cursed and threw rocks now falls down before him. And not just falls down before David, maybe it's him realizing this shows that God's hand has been on David. Not just because this pagan understanding, if whoever wins, that's the one whom God has blessed, but maybe he's now seen. This is the one. He is the anointed of God, and I will have right reverence before him. In verse 20, he makes confession. Again, we looked at Luke 15 last week. The only true statement that son says to the waiting father is, I have sinned before you. Sinned against heaven and in your sight. The other two statements, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son, let me be a hired servant, those are wrong. But confession is right. And if we don't get there, we don't get Jesus. If you don't get there, you don't understand your need for a Savior. Confession always goes before, should always go before forgiveness. Now, a little side note here. We all like forgiveness for ourselves, but we have a tough time offering that to others. You know, you see the speck in somebody else's eye, even when you've got a log sticking out of your eye. You get to verse 21. Abishai doesn't want Shimei forgiven for what he's done to David. David was down, and this dog kicked him. That can be us. Yeah, but he's done a bad thing. I've done bad things, and so have you. All have fallen short of the glory of God. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Romans 3:23, Romans 6:23. The wages of sin, any sin, that sin, your sin, my sin is death. We all need grace. And as the great Bible scholar Gandalf the Grey said, don't be so quick to deal out death and judgment. But they hurt my king, I know. But later when the Son of David comes, the King of Kings, it's grace and it's mercy. Will he be judged? You bet. Yes, he will be. But he teaches us to forgive our enemies. But boy, we struggle with that. It's interesting here, too, the word for that, Abishai, is adversary. which is an interesting word. Lursatan here, but very close to the word hasatan in the Hebrew, which means adversary. It's another word for the devil. It's a word that Jesus uses for Peter. You've become adversarial to me when you don't understand why I've come. Get thee behind me, adversary. We'll talk more on this later, though. But it's a critical day. We can't be lost to grief, and we can't be overzealous with judgment. Now, again, you get to 1 Kings 2, there could be something coming on, and the reason for this could be political while he's doing this, but for here there's forgiveness and oath-taking too, and you don't want to be rash, but this isn't a rash oath here. And then you get to 24 through 30, Mephibosheth, and you clearly see by the way he's groomed, there's real signs of mourning. That David left, and it's not like Ziba said, he's broken for what's happened to the kingdom, what's happened to David. It's like the old country phrase, you're going to believe me or your lying eyes. I'm going to believe my eyes. And my eye says Mephibosheth was still with David. He was a lame man, and it made sense that he couldn't have gotten out. And you hear his side of the story here. So again, going back to Ziba in the previous lesson, be careful. Get all the facts. Seek the Lord. Get godly counsel. Don't make rash vows. We're going to see it again rear its head in just a minute. And again, he ends up, Mephibosheth in his grace, ends up saying, let Ziba have it all, even though he was a deceiver, which is, again, another title for the devil. He was the father of lies. He is a liar. I'm wondering if the next guy is going to be called Beelzebub, but here we go. Barzillai, verses 34 through 40. He's 80. He's wealthy, but remember back in chapter 17, when David needed help, all these magnificent provisions that come to David. And he says, you're going to come with me. He's like, I'm 80, I'm old, let me go back and die with my fathers. But it's like David to honor this family. And he does that as well. You get to 1 Kings 2. We keep pointing you back for some of the unforgiveness or at least remembrances that happen there. You at least get some grace here for this man's family beyond this. So don't underestimate your care for somebody else and what it matters. Yeah, it's a small thing. It's when you and I will stretch and offer love and grace and help and prayer and care for somebody in their hour of need. David does not forget that, even in his old age. All right. So Judah, half of Israel, goes back with David. And, of course, there's still issues, still fighting words between Judah and Israel. I'll let you go back and, well, we're closer relatives. Yeah, but we did this, blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps going on. By the way, maybe this could have stopped, as we talked about last week, of being clear with expectations, to also be clear with love. To be clear as well with expectations. This is how I want you to act, and I love you both. David's trying to be clear, trying to bring unity. As a matter of fact, Jesus was very clear. I want the whole household of God. I want them to be one as the Father and I are one. This is my expectation. You all better act like it. I expect you to be holy. I expect you to serve. And so I just wrestle with this all the time as a pastor, to watch families fight at funerals instead of grieve together. Because a mom or a dad, whoever's passed, was not clear with the family, this is what I want at my funeral, and this is what I want to happen to my worldly possessions, or whatever that may be. You've got to be clear, this is what I want. And maybe some of this issue is because David was not as clear as he should have been. You get to chapter 20, you've got Sheba then rebelling. We get talk of earlier that Shimei's critique, he's Benjamite, he's of Saul, so of course he's heard that, thinking David had something to do, because of Saul's death. But he called David worthless. We know David's not worthless, but Scripture says this man is worthless. And then you've got this huge withdrawal of people from Israel from David. It just shows you how fickle people can be, how political people can be. They withdraw from David. We do get a little part here where the concubines who Absalom had put on the roof with him, they're provided for. They're treated as widows. Again, there's some mercy there. They're put under David's care. Amasa is given 3 days, Now, it sounds quick, but rally the troops. We've got to go. We're not going to wait and let Sheba get fortified. We're going to go and attack. And apparently, I don't think it's laziness. It's hard to rally people that quickly, but they don't get it done. So Abishai gets the call, rally people. So you got Joab's men, the mighty men, these other people. They get together and they get going after Sheba, who's rebelled. You do have Amasa finally show up, and Joab comes up to him. Now listen, bells should be ringing. The radar should be sounding. You don't get alone with Joab, right? We've seen what happens when you do that. But here he drops his sword. Okay, well, when he killed somebody before in private. Hey, I got to talk to you privately, and stabs him in the belly. Well, here he's dropped his sword, so I'm okay. How are you doing? Well, apparently there was another sword, a secret sword, and he kills Amasa. And by the way, he's not punished over this. Now, 1 Kings 2 is coming. It's not over. But there's no punishment here. We could argue about why that might be. But they get back to pursuing. They come to this town, Abel, and to this mound and attacking the walls. And finally a woman comes out and just kind of reasons or talks with Joab. Why are we all being punished for this? And again, in their cost, they were not trying to destroy the legacy of Israel, the heritage of Israel. We want him, and they provide him. His head flies over the wall, and everybody goes home. Chapter 21, and this is the start of the end. This is where, at least the ESV says, it's an epilogue. On the two outside chapters remaining, these outside chapters, you get sections about natural disasters or issues, and then these two other sections, not chapters, but two other sections, you're going to get talk of heroes, and then the middle sections, you're going to get two psalms. But here in 1 through 14, David avenges the Gibeonites. Now, there's this famine, there's this natural issue, and, again, we're so quick to point judgment. Well, Katrina happened because of what's going on in New Orleans. You don't get that from David. Instead of pointing fingers, he seeks the Lord. Lord, you tell me, is there something we've missed? He inquires of the Lord, and the Lord basically just says, this has happened because of Saul broke his word to the Gibeonites. There's still some guilt there. And by the way, I wonder what would have continued to happen if David hadn't sought the Lord on this. If you remember, go back to Joshua, another oath. An oath has been given. You got to be careful with vows. Make sure they're not done rashly, thought out, that they're biblical. But they're to be protected, and apparently Saul has broken that. And so David entreats him, hey, what can we do? So God will end this, and we don't want silver or gold. We're not going to be bought. But at the same time, we don't want to shed Israelite blood. I think that's how it would win. But look, Saul's family is the ones responsible for this. He's the one who broke it. So his family, it's that idea to the third or fourth generation, they're going to be the ones to pay. And this is difficult reading, y'all, as 7 are offered up from his family. Now, there is severity of punishment, especially for those in authority. You see it for teachers. You don't want to be a teacher because you'll have a stricter accountability for how you've lived, what you've taught. And there's a stricter accountability for kings. It seems David loses a baby over his sin. And now here are 7 sons being killed. Now, we say that. David sought the Lord here. It doesn't say God said do this. So you really got to do your homework here. God says here's why there's famine, so there needs to be correction. But he doesn't say accept this particular correction. Maybe there could have been more negotiation. So it doesn't say this is God endorsed, other than things need to be made right with them. And David does this to make it right. It satisfies them, obviously. They're the ones who asked for it and got a little zealous. And then David also, you've got, I won't get into all the story about covering up bodies, and then finally David buries those bones, the bodies and the bones, and you get Saul's and Jonathan's bones. Once those are buried, that natural issue is put to rest. It allows for God to work. Obedience to get things right. Now, he may not have gotten them exactly how God would have wanted it. We don't know that we have God endorsement over losing those 7. But he did take the right steps to make things right. And anytime we're obedient, that gives God the room. It doesn't force God's hand like the pagan gods, but it at least gives God room to work. And that's what God does here. And the issue is from the land is relieved. Okay. All right, yeah, the famine's relieved. Last little section here. They continue to have war with the Philistines. Verses 15 through 22, and there's not really a whole lot to say here. Yeah, not that I can say, just this persistent war, and that's kind of, we'll take a break. So we're going to get to this end of the epilogue next week. As always, if you have questions, because I know that again this is some more difficult parts of the text. Feel free to email me at barry@madison.org. Hope this has been helpful to you. I hope to hear from you as well. And we'll see you in 3 weeks for the end of this session.